Your natural ability for a subject doesn't matter, right? You can have a natural ability for any subject. You can know all the theory in that subject. You can go sit the exam and you will not get a score that you want. And the only thing that depends or will influence your score is the way you studied. And there's a specific way to study to get a specific score. The reason I know this is because in year 11, I did a subject, a language, which I had a natural ability for. I ended up getting a 27. I thought I would get a 45. In year 12, I did English, which I was only aiming to get a 30 because my essay writing skills was like at a year 6 level because I lived overseas for a couple of years before I was in year 12. I ended up getting a 42. So how does that make sense? How did I get a 27 for a language that I speak natively, I speak fluently, Sinhalese, which is the language I'm talking about, and I spent 4 years in Sri Lanka learning that. I ended up getting an A in ordinary levels, which means I went up against people in Sri Lanka and I was able to outperform them, but I come to Australia and I get a 27 out of 50. Doesn't make any sense. But then why was I able to get a 42 for English? Even though I seem like I can speak English properly, my writing and my spelling is terrible, still terrible to this day. The only reason I was able to do that is because I knew exactly how to study and how to break down the practice questions or the past papers, and I knew exactly what to do on a day-to-day basis based on that. So that's what I'm trying to tell you with this video, okay? I'm gonna give you the exact skill and all the knowledge which I have in my brain, so you know exactly how to look at a practice paper, how to look at any of your subjects, and reverse engineer specifically what to do on a week-to-week basis, or pretty much get at least an overall high-level sort of overview of what to do on a week-to-week basis. So you know you're going in the right direction, right? Everything doesn't have to be specific, but for sure you have to be going in the right direction. And if you don't know this, you are definitely not going to be going in the right direction. One thing before we start, SAC 1 is coming up. And if you were anything like me, when I was in year 12, you probably have so much anxiety around whether you're ready for the SAC, right? You don't know if you're ready for the SAC or you're not ready for the SAC. So what I've done is I've created an extra practice stack for you because your school is probably only going to give you 1 or 2, and they're probably not even going to be hard enough questions, right? And the SACs are always different. So I've created a practice stack, and me and Adrian have specifically made all the questions tailored so that you know exactly if you're lacking in certain areas with the theory, right? So link in the description, go download the SAC, it's completely free. I'll send it to your email with the solutions, right? If you can complete all the questions in that SAC in the specified time, it means that you're ready for the SAC pretty much, or you're on a really good level to start the SAC, right? But if you're struggling with those questions, all you have to do is just go back to your book and try and refine those questions and then try and do it again. This all started in year 11 when I got 27 for my 3-4 subject, right? I realized that if I continue in this trajectory, I'm probably going to get 20s and 30s for all my subjects in year 12, and I'm not going to be able to get a 90 plus ATAR or a 95 ATAR, right? Because I wanted to get to engineering at Monash University, which is where I'm at right now. And the only way to get that was to get like a 92, 93 ATAR, and I wanted a scholarship as well, so I wanted to aim higher, right? I ended up getting a 97.75. But the only way that I was able to do that is because I went on the ATAR calculator and I analyzed what scores I needed to get in order to excel, in order to get high 90s, right? And I realized English is in your top 4 subjects. So if you don't take English seriously, you are not going to be able to, you can probably get to like 93, 94, but you're not going to be able to get to like 97, 98, 99. That's what I saw. The easiest way to boost your ATAR, that last few points at the very top, is to make sure that English is one of your stronger subjects, because that has to be taken in your top 4, right? It can't be pushed down to your bottom. So what I did was then I went through like a whole journey for a whole year trying to figure out exactly how do I get better at English, but not specifically how do I get better at English, because I knew that was bullshit, to be honest. I wanted to figure out how do I seem like I know English, right? How do I show the examiner that I'm really good at English? How do I make it seem like I'm very good at writing an exam, that I would know English and I had studied well, okay? So what I ended up doing was we have a book which we had to read. It was called Burial Rights. That's a book which I read. And then we have another sort of analysis of like a newspaper article that we had to do. But the one which I pretty much knew for sure that I could do well was the analysis of the book. Not because I'm able to write it on the spot. I'm not able to like think of things on the spot and write it, like a lot of people that do English are able to do. But what I am good at doing is remembering things, right? Because memory, like you have a whole year to memorize things. So what I thought is, okay, if I have 25 essays or 20 essays in my head memorized like a speech, because anyone can memorize like a 10-minute long speech, right? If I write 20 amazing A+ essays, which are like in different topics, and I remember every single one of them, I can just regurgitate, cut and paste from different essays and regurgitate all that information on the final exam during the English test, right? And that's exactly what I did. So for the whole of year 12, what I was trying to do, my goal was to come up with 25 or 20 really, really good essays and memorize them word for word. And it got to the point where someone would give me a prompt like a few days before the exam, and I would be able to like say pretty much what I was going to write. Like people would be there trying to think about what they're going to write on the test. As soon as someone gives me a prompt, I would just start regurgitating stuff that came out of my mouth just because I had 20 essays remembered in my head. Okay? So that was the secret. This is how I thought. If we're getting assessed on an essay, right, it needs to be an A+ essay. So the highest chance of me producing an A+ essay is to not leave anything to chance on the day. I'll remember everything beforehand. I'll remember 25 A+ essays, and I will go and regurgitate, cut and paste from different essays that I have in my head. And of course, it's going to be an A+. Right? There's no way that I'm going to get anything below a 40 or a 41 or a 42, whatever, if I'm able to just regurgitate an A+ essay. It's all in my head. So the journey which I went through after that was I had an English teacher. I went to English tuition. So I had an English teacher, and what I would realize is I go to this English class, and this was after school. So I had like an English tutor. I went after school, I would sit down and we would talk about the book, whatever. But I realized that whatever he said, whatever came out of his mouth was like liquid gold. If I could get that and I could write it down on the essay or on the test, then I would get an A+ for English, right? And I would get like high 40s or 40+ or whatever. I wouldn't get 30s for sure. So what I did was, and I don't know if he, hopefully he'll forgive me for doing this, but I didn't tell him. I pressed record on my phone at the start. I put it in my pocket, and I would go to class and I would listen and I would ask him questions like, oh, what would you write if we had this prompt? And then he would just start regurgitating like liquid gold out of his mouth and saying these amazing English like analysis for the book, right? Because he's been teaching it for years, right? And I would record that and I would go home and I would listen to the audio and I would just start writing. I would start writing pretty much everything he said, and I would go and I would show him next week, like, here's the prompt that I asked you last week. Here is what I wrote. Is this good? And he would look at it and he'd be like, oh, this is amazing. He's like, oh, this is exactly what I was thinking, right? So that's pretty much what I did. I recorded my English teacher for a year. I went home and then I would go through the recording and I would write down word for word all the liquid gold that came out of his mouth, all the analysis that he made on the spot. And after a year, I had so many different essays and so many different bits of analysis and paragraphs memorized in my head that when the test came, all I had to do was just start writing and my hand just flew across the paper because I didn't have to think about anything. I was actually surprising myself on the test. I was like, oh, this is really good. I can't believe I'm giving this in. I don't get to take this home, because I was so surprised with all the analysis that I was writing, just because I didn't leave anything to chance. I just started writing and everything just came out because everything was in my head. I didn't have to think about anything. Nothing I wrote on the English exam. Let me say that again. Nothing I wrote on the English test, the English exam, the VCE exam, was something which I came up with on the exam. Everything was pre-practiced, right? It was pre-recorded. Then I wrote it down. Then I sent it to my teacher. Then he was really happy with it and he gave me some feedback and I tweaked it. And then I remembered that A+ essay. If you can do that, then you will be able to have any score that you want. You will be able to get a really good score. Because as long as you find a good teacher, right, and you actually ask for advice, and you take the advice, and you remember the advice, and you memorize it, you will start writing liquid gold on the test. Another thing which I did was, so that was the book, right? That was the easiest way for me to do the book. And you can apply this to your other subjects. Don't just tell me that this is for English, right? Because can be applied on like a really broad spectrum. I want you to understand the way that I did this was, you have to understand why you're getting assessed. You're getting assessed on how good you're able to concisely, in a concise manner, explain something on the English, on like a analysis of a book, right? If you can just pre-make that, then the examiner is going to think he came up with this on the spot. They don't know if you made it beforehand or made it on the spot. They're just going to assume you made it on the spot. It doesn't matter, right? So if you have that advantage of you have a whole year to prepare, why wouldn't you remember 20 essays? If you're struggling with English, right? If you're the type of person that's good with English and things come easy to you, whatever, that's good. I wish I was like you, but I'm not like you. So this is the easiest way that I found that I was able to sort of hack the system, whatever, right? You have to reverse engineer what they're going to ask. So if they're going to ask something and you can prepare for it as much as possible throughout the year, even if that means memorizing 25 essays, do it, because you know for a fact that you're going to get a good score then, right? If you've done that and you have 25 essays memorized and they're all perfect, you can go to the exam and you can sit the exam and you would have so much confidence just because you have so much knowledge in your head about what exactly you're going to write, right? You have no anxiety at that point. And part of the exam, the year 12 exam, is confidence. So if you can get your confidence up, you're going to do a really good exam, right? The other thing which I did was for the analysis of the newspaper, or like the article that we had to do on the spot. That's not really something that I was able to practice for, because it's not a book that we get to read beforehand. This was something that we get like a newspaper article on the spot, and the newspaper article can be anything. So the way I practice for that is, again, I did like 30, 40 different newspaper articles at like analysis, but I adopted the same writing style. So I would have a template, right? So this is less structured or less rigid than the method I used before, but I still was able to do this really well, right? I wrote like 25 different essays, but each time I wrote the essay, I came up with a template, right? So the template is something like this. It would be like the structure of a sentence. So I would read the newspaper article, and then I would talk about like a theme or something, and then I would like, there's a certain structure. I can't really remember how I like the specifics, but try to understand that there was a certain structure of the paragraph, that you start with this, then you talk about this, and you talk about this, and you talk about the themes, and you talk about how this contradicts this and how this is similar to this, and blah blah blah. And if you can just go to the paragraph, and as you're reading the paragraph on the exam, you're looking for these themes, for that predetermined structure that you had. So you're not just winging it on the exam, right? You're looking for the themes in that, how can I take the things in this paragraph and sort of feed it into the system which I've already come up with. And when you're reading the newspaper on the exam, or like the article or whatever, you will naturally start to see, oh, this is going to go in this paragraph. This is going to go in this paragraph. This is going to go in this paragraph. So it's like you have a template with like blanks in it in your mind before the exam. And as you read the newspaper, as you read the thing that you're meant to analyze, you're pretty much filling in the blanks in your head really, really quickly. And as you write it, those blanks get filled out. So you're leaving it less up to chance, and you're increasing the probability of getting a high score, right? Doing well in English, I'm going to say this again. How good you are at English doesn't affect how much of a good grade you're going to get in English, right? The only way you can do well in English, or pretty much any subject, is by studying in a way and reducing the probability of getting a negative outcome. How do we reduce the downside? The easiest way to reduce the downside is by eliminating all risks associated with uncertainty. Okay, so what if I wake up on the day and I'm not feeling good on the day of the exam? I'm not feeling good. I go sit the exam. My mind's not working. My mind's blocked, and then I have a really bad exam. I write a really bad exam. It doesn't reflect my English knowledge. How do I reduce that downside? The easiest way to reduce that downside, or eliminate it completely, is by memorizing everything that you possibly could memorize before you go and sit the exam. If you're able to do this, you've pretty much eliminated all your downside, correct? Right? Because you've memorized everything. There's no way you're going to go and sit the exam and your brain's going to stop working, because you've memorized everything. You've done the work beforehand instead of doing the work during the exam. Okay? So try to apply this for every single subject possible. This is the easiest way that you can get a really good score. you need to know what you need to study for every single day. So if you're doing English and you want to use the same method which I used, if your English is not one of your strongest subjects and you want to make it one of your strong subjects, all you have to do is come up with 20 different ideas for different essays which span across a wide range of themes, and then go out every single day for a couple of hours, and whenever you study English, if it's for half an hour, and try to fill in those blanks, right? At the end of the year, you should have a stack about this thick with all the prompts and all the paragraphs and all of the essays that you're going to use for English, okay? Same for any other subject that requires memorizing, writing short answer, long answer, responses, and that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to talk about, in the next video, how to apply this in a subject like mathematics, right? Because I had a different strategy for mathematics compared to like subjects like English. I'm more inclined to do like math related subjects. I do engineering at Monash University, but I have a different strategy for that. So I'll talk about in the next video. But what I wanted you to take from this video is that just because you have a natural ability for something doesn't mean you're going to do well. Just because you think you know this content doesn't mean you're going to do well. The only thing which determines if you're going to do well is your ability to minimize the downside throughout the year. Minimize the downside or eliminate the downside for all your subjects, and I guarantee the probability of you getting a good score will skyrocket. Okay? That's all you need to do.